so when Jen told me that the verse was 2 Timothy 2:21, I went to read it and it says, "Therefore, if anyone cleanses himself from the latter, he will be a vessel for honor." I says to myself, okay, what's that therefore? And what's this? Cleanse yourself from the latter. Pretty much, if you in that elementary, they tell you, you got to find out up further in the context. So I look up further, and I happen to notice that in verse 16, Paul is telling Timothy, shun profane and vain babbling. And he goes on to elaborate about some other unpleasant things that some people had been partaking in. And there was specifically two fellas mentioned in verse 17. And the thing was, they were acting as if they, knew, but they didn't really know what they thought they knew. So this is the babbling that Paul was talking about. But I'm going to throw into there, see, when I read that, and I thought about these fellas, and Paul's talking about cleansing yourself of this stuff, the first thought that popped into my mind was when I was a kid, me and my Irish twin brother, that means we were born less than a year apart, we were adventurers. We explored the neighborhood. It was just our thing. And just behind the Clinton Bailey markets, there used to be this big, ugly, gnarly-looking empty field. Just random empty field, looked disgusting. And there were also these huge pits that were obviously dug in the dirt. Big, deep enough that you had to have a ladder climb in and out. So we happened to mention that to her mom, and she said, I know exactly what that's all about. You see, there are people that dig up the old medicine bottles, because that used to be a garbage dump. And they go and clean them up, and they take them to the Superfleet up on Walden and sell them as knickknacks. And sure enough, I went there, and I saw them, and they look pretty dang well cool. Even though we're scuffed up and beat up and chipped a little bit, they look pretty dang cool. So this is what Paul's referring to, cleaning yourself up. And he goes on to say, just before, Paul is talking about how in a great house there are not only vessels of gold and silver, but also of wood and clay. And there are vessels for noble purposes and other vessels for not so noble purposes. But keep in mind, that does not mean that the vessel is not noble, because I'll tell you straight up, I will take this any day over even something as gorgeous as this, because my brother gave it to me. But to say all that, the point being, don't be too disappointed if you don't happen to be one of those gold or silver vessels, because by the end of my presentation, you'll know what God considers his most useful vessel. Now, if there happens to be anybody who knows about getting in a mess, that'd be Paul. So he knows where he's coming from. Because if you'll see back in verse 9 of the same chapter, he happens to be a prisoner at this time. He's writing this letter to Timothy. And for that matter, for doing what was right. But that comes to me now. See, I was saved at the age of 12, but if you had fast forwarded 12 years of my life, from that point, you'd be, hang on a second. If we put this girl on trial for being a Christian, she'd be found innocent. But you see, I was a single mother of 4 children, high school dropout, and on public assistance. Anybody would have said, nobody can use that girl for nothing. It would have been me. But I'm telling you, grace of God, me and the father of my children, we're married now, and here I am, to you, God. see all these lovely, sweet, beautiful little vessels in front of me. I actually got all these lovely little things from a consignment store. In other words, used, somebody's castaways. And you look, you think, how do people decide that they're going to donate anyhow? Well, I could just picture somebody walking around the house going, paint's all chipped on that. That looks kind of old and gnarly. Oh, shucks. Dang, there's a crack in here. And, what's with this? Who's BP? Who made this anyhow? Yeah, whatever. But, ooh, my bad. You know what? It was all cracked and chipped up anyhow. I think probably because it could barely stand on its own, I can say. Yeah. Whatever. But you probably figured, I already had it broken. It was done deliberately. Funny things, last night when I came in to set up, I actually already had a vessel that was broken, but my daughter found some super glue and she put it back together. I was like, no, broken vessel. But I love God's providence, because this morning I went back to the consignment store to try to get me a broken vessel. I walked up to the cashier. I said, I'm going to ask you something fun. Do you happen to have any broken, pottery, some kind of vessel? She says, no, anytime we happen to have something broken, we just throw it away right away. And it's like, ain't that like the world though? Just, throw you away right away, just the minute you're broken, Well, I can tell you, here's the point I'm going to tell you. You probably figured it out by now. This is God's most useful vessel right here. If you want to know why, just give me a sec. I'll clean it up, I swear. You see, my husband says this all the time. This is awesome. He likes to use the crackpots of the world, because when God goes to fill them up with the Holy Spirit, they just spill out His Spirit all over the people all around them.